One of the most unique techniques to the ukulele is called the chunk. Sounds something like this. You notice it's a lot like a snare drum. It's this cool percussive effect that almost makes it sound like there's a drummer playing along with you despite it just being one ukulele. Now, this technique is really tricky. It took me a long time to learn, and there's a lot of different ways to do this technique. We're going to look at two of them. We're going to look at the way that I like the most, and then this way I like the second most, to see if one of these works best for you. So let's go ahead and start. With the chunk, what we do is we're going to start by taking our palm and the end of our palm right here. And we're going to place that on the strings, sort of at the lower end of the sound hole, just like that. This is one of two motions that happen nearly simultaneously. But this motion needs to happen just before the second one. What the second motion is using your middle and ring fingers. You're going to try to strike your E and A strings. If you accidentally hit the C or the G, it's not a big deal, it's okay, but we're aiming for the E and the A. You're going to try to strike those with those fingers, and you're going to try to strike those strings as the palm is coming to mute the strings themselves. Now, hear how bad that sounds? The reason is, this technique is not possible to do slow. I actually think of it a lot like if you're riding a bike. So if you know how to ride a bike, you know a couple things. One is, once you learn, you never forget. And chunking's a lot like that, in that once you get it, it goes well, and then it becomes really difficult to tell someone else how to do it, much like riding a bike. But when you're learning, you have to do a couple things. One is you have to go full speed, right? You can't learn how to ride a bike going slowly. It's much more difficult to find your balance and to be able to keep going. Chunking's a lot like that, in that we need to be practicing the chunk at full speed. We need to be making sure that all the motions are happening all at the speed that we're going to be playing it at so that we can get that nice tone. But the problem is, much like riding a bike, when we're starting to go fast, we fall, and we fall a lot, or at least in my case, I fell a lot. And we're going to fall on our ukulele in the way that we're going to get some nasty tones out of this instrument when we're first starting to chunk. But it's okay. The trick is to get back on the bike, keep going, just like with the uke, to keep on going. And you're going to have a lot less bumps and bruises trying to learn how to chunk than riding a bike. So this is what it looks like. Again, we have to practice it fast. We're going to be taking these two fingers, striking those strings, while this part of the palm is muting them. You'll notice right now, my fretting hand is not playing anything. And that's because the entire sound of the chunk is created with the strumming hand, so we don't need anything else going on, no other distractions. So another way to chunk that's a little bit more efficient but doesn't quite give you the loud snare pop is if you use this part of your thumb right here to mute. So instead of being the hand back like this, your hand's more forward like this. You then won't use your middle and ring fingers, but rather just use the index finger, still trying to strike the E and the A strings. If you strike a little bit more than that, it's okay. But we're aiming for the E and A. And you're making that motion as the thumb comes over to mute. So that looks something like this. Both of these methods work really well. And you can even hybridize the two a little bit, where maybe both parts are coming down and you're using the index finger or the middle and ring. It's a lot like riding a bike in that you can't really tell someone how to balance. You just say, don't fall. And with chunking, it's get that sound. And so hopefully these little tricks will help you get that. Now, when you're doing a chunk, it's important that we only do a down for the chunk motion. There are only down chunks, no up chunking here. When we're working with a chunk, you can see it has a symbol that looks something like this. A box with an X through it. And this is made popular by sites such as Ukulele Underground and shows that we want that chunk sound with this particular symbol. So now when we start to put this in, the trick is whatever motions come after the chunk cannot be different than how we normally would play them. So if you see here, we have a chunk followed by an upstrum. It's very important to do the chunk as normal and do the upstrum as you normally would do an up. It's not some weird hybrid between chunking and strumming, but it feels like you're going to want to. And the reason is, we do our chunk, and now our hand is in this big open position, right? It's sprawled out, it's kind of messy, the whole chunk. But when we come up, we want to resume back to our normal strumming, which means our index finger is going to come up with the pad of our finger. So let's go ahead and try going chunk up a few different times. So we're going to go chunk, up, chunk, up, chunk, up, chunk, up. Now another combination is sometimes we'll have a chunk followed by a miss. Very important to give that miss its credit, meaning it's really easy to go chunk, miss, and notice how I didn't do any motions. That's a bad thing. So we want to go chunk, miss, bringing our hand back up as we make that miss. Chunk, miss, chunk, miss, chunk, miss, chunk, miss. So the trick is to keep practicing the chunk until you get that nice snare pop. And it's just like riding a bike in that once you get it, you'll never forget.